World Drugs Day, observed annually on June 26, is a significant global initiative that holds particular importance in the African context. The world drug problem has far-reaching consequences affecting millions of lives worldwide. In Africa, the challenges posed by drug abuse and illicit drug trafficking are significant and demand urgent attention. World Drug Day serves as a powerful platform to address these issues head-on. It also highlights the need for international cooperation, prevention measures, and access to treatment and rehabilitation services. Moreover, this year, the campaign recognizes the importance of combating stigma and discrimination against people who have substance abuse disorders. It is also encouraging the need to promote language and attitudes that are respectful and non-judgmental. By prioritizing a people-centered approach, World Drug Day aims to foster compassion, emphasize human rights, and implement evidence-based practices in combating drug abuse and its associated harms in Africa and beyond. Let's have a chat about drug abuse and illicit trafficking of drugs. I am Kemini Amano, and you're welcome to The Square. Remember, our conversation today is no substitute for medical or professional advice. Joining our gathering today are Dr. Ife Bamidele. He's a drug-free advocate, recovery support counselor, and founder of drug-free clubs in Ekiti, Nigeria. We also have joining us from Accra, Ghana, Salim Sule Wangabi, who is a clinical psychologist, and Oluwaseun Gabriel Olorunkoye, who is a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist here in Lagos, Nigeria. Gentlemen, you're welcome to The Square.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start from, absolutely. I want to start from, the focus this year to deal with stigma and discrimination against people with substance abuse disorders. And I start with you, Ife. Ife, how much of a problem is this for people in recovery?
Thank you very much. So for me, today it's about people first. The theme of the World Drug Day this year is people first, ending stigma and discrimination and strengthening prevention. So the first question that comes to mind is why? Why are we strengthening people first? Why are we talking about strengthening prevention and talking about people first? It's about the fact that many people die from drug overdose or drug abuse, but it is not the drugs that kill them. It is the stigma, the inability to have access to treatment or to recovery. That is what leads to most of the deaths. And that is why it is an important conversation at this time. That's why stigma is a big challenge, discrimination is a big challenge, but we're saying drugs do end the life of people, but it is not just the drugs, it is how rehabilitation and recovery is handled. And that's why today's World Drug Day is an important one.
Indeed. So, Salim, how would you say that this stigma and discrimination that we talk about in our public health system, in our communities, present themselves?
Good afternoon to all your viewers and listeners, and thank you for this opportunity. Stigma, basically, as I would always put it, is just prejudice about why a person does or does not engage in a thing. So we prejudice a lot of things. So for most people who engage in substance use, even before it becomes substance abuse, then they are doing something wrong, either to achieve an ulterior motive or to cause harm to others or themselves. So then you are not interested in knowing why it is done, how it started, but just passing judgment, and usually the judgment is negative. And how does it present itself? In varied ways. Sometimes stigma is just by how you look at a person. I say in clinic, most of the time when people come to you and they report certain conditions to you, your affect and your body language can give off stigma signs. Sometimes the words you use, the remarks you make when people speak to you, all can manifest stigma. And in more behavioral terms, withdrawing from others, secluding them, talking ill against them, and not giving them the required service. Just like Ife said, if there are treatments available for substance use disorder or for some withdrawal symptom that patients have, but yet because you believe they chose this path, then therefore as a doctor or as a healthcare professional, you are not going to offer them this support. So there's no advocacy on it, there's no education on it, and they are not welcome to the health facilities. What will happen? They will find their solutions elsewhere, and here the death will come about. In the community, sometimes there are statements, both culturally, in the movies, in the churches, in the mosques, by how we, in the way by which we speak about people who use substances, putting them as one, criminals, two, as wrongdoers. So even if someone found themselves in a situation where they are using a substance that has become addictive or they are dependent on it, they would not show up or open up for solution. And there's one thing I want us to note about stigma. When a person feels stigmatized or ostracized, they build their own coping and defensive mechanism, therefore acting as though, well, if you say I'm bad, then I'm bad. So they rather become problematic to the society and do not want to even listen to anybody or seek for help. So these are some of the ways by which stigma presents itself in our communities, in the hospital. And lastly, there's also the self-stigma. I found myself engaging in a behavior or using a substance. Yes, I might have started because to avoid some pain, to deal with some emotional difficulty, or just by exuberance, youthful exuberance.
Right.
Problem, I start sticking.
Well, I think we lost Salim there for a bit, but I'll move on to Oluwaseun now. Oluwaseun, what are some of the cultural reasons behind why, our public health sector, our communities discriminate against people with substance abuse disorders?
Well, one of the reasons, in this part of the world, culturally we are religious, and we have this, let me put it this way, holier than thou attitude. So addiction is seen, or substance disorder is seen as a behavioral fault. And substance use disorder is basically a brain disease. But not until when we reorientate most of us about the substance disorder, that this is not a behavioral thing. It's, nobody chooses to be addicted to any substances. They might start with experimenting, and from there gravitate to occasional usage, then they become compulsive users. So it's not something that addiction didn't just jump on someone. It's something that, and people say they chose it, they chose this path. No, nobody chose to be addicted to a particular substance. It's something that they, made through experiments, like I said. So not until when we start changing our orientation about seeing this issue, this public health concern, as not a behavioral issue, as not something that, okay, it is the devil that is punishing you, or your mom or your dad did something wrong. Not until when we start seeing it as a public health concern and changing our language about the way we even present even results of drug use to someone. We say, okay, someone is dirty, someone is clean, someone is hooked.
So Oluwaseun,
yes.
Oluwaseun, what would it take for this reorientation to take place, and whose job would that be?
That's with the professionals, because you can't leave it to the hands of just any kind of person who is interested in substance disorder, because professionals will have a way of at least making people see reasons. And it must not just stop within the confines of a rehab. It must be taken to different sphere of life, like churches, mosques, even the marketplaces, so that people can know that you are having issues substance disorder doesn't mean.
Well, I think we lost Oluwaseun.
Those words, once you start changing your words, yeah. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Hello? Yeah. Okay, like I said, not until when we need to carry the message to different sphere of life, like the churches, the mosque, the marketplaces, and even schools. That is when you can start seeing a lot of changes about it.
I see.
And we also need to teach even parents, the pastors, the imams, and what have you, about substance disorder, because it's not just about casting and binding. As much as, yes, that aspect can be done, the professional aspect needs to be focused on.
Very well.
Because most of the time, you see,
I want to move on to
state-based rehab centers, they always focus more on just buying. Yes.
Indeed. I'll move on to Ifena. If talk to us, you have also dealt directly with people who are in recovery now. What are some of the stories they share to you with you? And then also, if you could tell us specifically, what are the most favorite types of substances abused in this part of town?
Okay, so before I go to what the people say, especially because of the experience, one of the things I asked this morning when we had a discussion in one of the centers about today's World Drug Day is 4 important questions that were asked. Number 1, why people first? Number 2, how will we achieve people first? Number 3, when do we need to achieve people first? And then number 4 is, by whom will we achieve these people first? Now, for the people who are persons who use drugs and who are in recovery, one of the major things that you have mentioned earlier is about language. One of the things they say is about how they are described by an action or a decision that they have made, whether or not they are comfortable or happy about that decision or not. So I used an example today. Assuming that you take a particular drink, your favorite cola drink, on a daily basis, when you are introduced in a place, are you introduced as yourself? Are you introduced as Oluwaseun? Are you introduced as Momin? Are you introduced as Ife? Or are you introduced as the person who drinks a particular drink? Is that your first description? So we describe people as drug users, as junkies, which is wrong. They are persons first. That's why we mention people first. They are persons. They are persons who use drugs. They are persons who have drug disorders. They may or will stop using drugs someday. And so we must first be humane. We must think about humanity of the persons and relate with them as persons first. And that will help us in this project of strengthening prevention. Now, for the drugs of abuse that are popular in most parts of Africa, marijuana, popularly called weed, is one of the things that is very, very common in many parts of Africa, West Africa, and almost all parts of Africa, because there's also farmers who grow cannabis sativa, which is popularly known as marijuana or weed. And so this is popular on the streets. There are also those who use cough syrups that have codeine. There's also those who use tramadol, rofinol, and some other types of substances that are popularly used. But around and about town, the World Drug Report for 2023 was just released today, and marijuana is still one of the leading drugs that is commonly abused.
Indeed, I was also asking if you could just summarize that for me. What fuels the this disorder, the addiction to these substances? What are some of the things that you have learned dealing with people?
One of the things that I have learned, and that's one of the biggest messages for the World Drug Day, is that drug use disorders are a treatable condition. Meaning that people who currently use drugs today can actually stop with the right support, with medical treatment and signposting, pre-rehabilitation support, rehabilitation and post-rehabilitation support, which is important. And that's why when I asked that first question of by whom, one of the things Oluwaseun spoke about was the people who are responsible for ensuring that we strengthen prevention. The religious organizations, community, family, individuals themselves, educational institutions, traditional institutions and traditional bodies, news agencies and media. Those are part of the organizations and institutions that will help with strengthening prevention and stopping the stigma and discrimination. So it is important for us to note that drug use disorders are a treatable condition. That is one of the greatest lessons I've learned. And the people want you to know that some people want to stop. They just need signposting. They need to know, how can I get help? Many people are watching this program and they're asking the question, now that I have a family member, I have a friend, I have a cousin, I have a colleague who is deep in this and wants help, how do they get help? And when they finally start getting help, how can they how can we ensure that when they have gotten help, this is something that is actually
Well,
solved for them?
Well, I want to go to Sule now. And Sule, we know that in Ghana, one of the top drugs that people abuse is tramadol. And for a long time, it has been that. But, you know, I do want you to tell us, what are the dangers of using some of these drugs, especially, you know, one like cannabis, where people would say, well, this is a herb and it's good for everybody. And the conversation around cannabis has changed over the years. Talk to us about these.
Let me start by saying this. There are a number of things humans can get addicted to, and not to even mince my word, drugs or substances that are abused do have some positive effects. The high you get. So I think it was Efe who was mentioning a drink you take. When you take sugary substances, they go to trigger what we call the limbic system part of your brain, which makes you happy. That is the part of the brain where desire exists. Now, when you take any substance, the only problem with substances that have been classified, I think Ife mentioned a lot of them, including alcohol, which we have left out. The point is that it starts with what we call tolerance. You take a substance for a specific reason, either to sedate you, to make you high, to make you forget about something, or to just be in the moment to enjoy it. Now, because of the psychoactive substances contained in these substances, they end up becoming directly triggering your limbic system. So you no more are able to sleep, you are unable to be happy or engage in activities you used to with.
Well, I think we lost Salim's
Lost
connection.
me again. Sorry.
Right, just go ahead, Salim.
I was saying once the tolerance sets in, you need higher dosages of these substances. And then it moves to dependence, where you cannot even do anything else without it. Then we are on the road to addiction. But addiction in itself has both psychological, physical side effects. First of all, your concentration levels are really, really decreased. Without the substances in your bloodstream, you can't tend to concentrate or focus. So most of them always need to go back to these substances to be able to function properly. Secondly, like I said, sleep is disrupted. So sometimes people are unable to go to sleep until they have taken a substance, or they can't even remain awake unless they are on a substance. Then appetite comes in. Then sometimes we have what we call the withdrawal symptoms. These are symptoms that you begin to feel when you are not on these substances. Headaches could be one of them, trembling could be one of them, and all other physiological changes that occur with your body without an external substance which you started using by yourself. It doesn't stop there. There are some social side effects of using these substances. So in case you are a son, a father, a mother, a sister, or a colleague, you start to share social responsibilities to be able to get these substances or use them. So maybe you are supposed to be in class as a student, but then when you have the desire or the urge to smoke cannabis, what happens? You skip class and you spend time finding the substances. And like if you said, this is not you anymore. That's one of the conversations we need to have. Most people make comments that when you have the willpower, you can stop using a substance. That is when it's not got to an addiction, dependent, or high tolerance stage.
Right. I was also going to say that based on the explanation you have given, it would seem that you don't even realize when you're going downslope towards addiction. Because, I mean, you take that painkiller and it deals with your pain. The next moment it doesn't. So you increase the dosage and it keeps going on and on and on. But we'll come back to the people conversation. Right now, Oluwaseun, I want us to talk about the new types of synthetic drugs that we're seeing in our system. Over the past several years, we're seeing an increased influx of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and other synthetic forms of drugs on the continent. Why has this become the case? Why has it become easy for the influx of these drugs onto our markets in West Africa and in Southern Africa particularly?
Okay. Can I tell you something? Before 2013, Nigeria was known as just a transit nation, whereby people can just stop by, package something and move. But now, as we speak, we are now a manufacturing nation. we manufacture most of these drugs, like ice now. From 2020, you see a lot of factories. That's why you see NDLA in the news. They are busting most of these labs. But prior to that time, we didn't have such. So it's easy for these drugs to infiltrate all the nooks and crannies of Nigeria and across West Africa, if I may say. So it's so long we've gravitated from being a transit nation to a manufacturing nation, you always find this. And one of the side effects of most of these drugs, like the synthetic ones, is that it causes the high level of psychosis is always on the eye.
Right.
You see someone getting paranoid for no just reason. See someone, just cutting themselves, and a lot of mental health concerns that we never used to normally experience are on the rise now due to these synthetic materials. Reason because they put all sorts. I can tell you, for ice now, you see bleach. If you check the concentration of ice, that is methamphetamine, it contains bleach, baking soda, all of that combined together. So imagine you taking a bleach.
I mean, no one would drink bleach.
Yes, but the way it's been packaged, you will not know that even the cocaine that people are even using now, they are not the real ones. You just get the major active content. Maybe it might just be 10%. Then they mix it with a lot of artificial things that are way dangerous than the active content. So you can imagine what it turns to.
I see. I want to move on to Ife now. Ife, traditionally we have seen, in fact, governments all over the world tackle people at the bottom of the hierarchy when it comes to busting some of these drug networks. A lot of emphasis has been on the users, and as we have seen on our continent, we have not been able to move away from tackling the users and tackling those who are manufacturing, like Oluwaseun has talked to us about. But I do want to find out from you, why is it important that we begin to help users and tackle rather the people who are producing and bringing in these substances? And what are the challenges that exist, preventing authorities from going after these networks?
There's a two-pronged approach that is used in Nigeria. That is the drug demand reduction with the NDLEA, which is the agency that supervises
this time is the first network that is disappointing.
Demand reduction.
If we lost you for a bit, you were saying that there's a two-pronged approach in Nigeria. Talk to us about those approaches.
There's a two-pronged approach. The approach is the drug demand reduction approach and the drug supply reduction approach. So for drug supply reduction, the goal is to ensure that the people who bring in the drugs don't bring in the drugs. Cut it from supply. The trafficker does not need advisory. He's in for business. He doesn't need any counseling. He's trying to make money. Now, if you read about drugs and drug business, you will discover that the people who are in drug business know how much it is worth, and they are willing to go any length for it. The question is, the people who are trying to combat it, how rich are they, and how willing are we to put resource that can counter it? The second thing that you mentioned is with drug demand reduction. When you cut the supply, the demand reduces, right? So with drug demand, one of the things that we're trying to do is to ensure that we counsel people, support people, let them know why they should not take it. That's the place of advocacy. So that two-pronged approach is drug demand reduction, drug supply reduction. But why is it that it is always the poor, the people who are of low estates, that are usually busted, that are usually caught? I mentioned at a seminar that I was speaking earlier that the rich man has a good lawyer on his side and he can pay for it. The rich man can also pay for rehabilitation when he or his children have a similar situation. As a poorer person, you may not be able to afford both. So you are in a more difficult situation, and that's the majority of the poor. So you cannot afford the treatment, and you can also not afford the legal process. So you are there's double jeopardy. In addition to that, there's also the reputation or the image. For example, if you turn on your device or your phone, check on social media. In some parts of West Africa, you find a tone like this: onkolos, onkolos, onkolos. You find people who are swimming in the pools of water, who are manifesting some psychotic behavior after having used some substances or drugs. Now, people post these pictures everywhere, but that is somebody's son, that is somebody's daughter, that is somebody's uncle, that is somebody's sister, that is somebody's brother. When it is from a family that has reputation, they will immediately go and seek for help for that person. But when it is from a family that they are trying to look for how to eat, how to drink, what to survive on, they immediately stigmatize, they discriminate, they push that person out. We want to bring shame to our family. And that person who is on colos or who is dancing in that pool, who they are recording, whose picture is going viral, that is somebody's child. And that person first, that person requires help, that person needs support. And that is why this campaign must go on. So it's a challenge, and all of us, all hands must be on deck. The security agencies are faced with a big battle. The institutions that are trying to fight, they have tough times. I spoke to different non-governmental organizations in preparation for the World Drug Day, and one of the things they're asking for is, how can we have funds? How are we going to have money to be able to set up these events? How can we go out to prepare some of the organizations that stop these drug traffickers? There are men going to the places, they are shot, some of them are dead. In a particular village, one man went to go to a farm, they went to destroy a particular farm for cannabis, and then there was traps that were already set for them. The officer put his feet in one of the traps and the leg was amputated.
My goodness, my goodness.
So what happens to the children of that man? What happens to his family?
Absolutely.
What happens to the other officers? So there needs to be more support from all of us. And then governments must see this as a challenge that requires the type of resource. The money on the other side of the divide is very heavy. The willpower on the other side is very strong. And so we need a stronger willpower, we need stronger determination, and we need stronger support for persons who are fighting this battle.
Salim, I'll come to you with the same question. What do you think is the case in Ghana?
Let me put it this way. This is more philosophical. In terms of the preventive aspect of substance use disorder, if you look at the classification of substance use disorders, we have the alcohol-related disorders, the hallucinogen-related disorders, the caffeine-related disorders. So when it comes to issues of which one is illicit and which one is legal, it's more legislative and judicial, and I do not want to go inside. That's not my area of expertise. However, what I say in clinic most of the time is, as a person, whatever you are using, make sure it is decisional and it does not cause you any negative side effects. Because as we keep fighting what has been termed as illicit drugs like heroin, cannabis, cocaine, etc., we realize that even medications that are supposed to be sold for medical purposes, such as tramadol, cough syrups, people are finding ways of abusing them just to acquire that high or sedation from using the substance. So when it comes to advocacy around substance use disorder, it's a bit very, very dicey just by making it a legal fight. I keep saying this most of the time, depending on the jurisdiction in which you find yourself, a substance that you could be addicted to could be legal, and you're allowed to use it just like alcohol. No one's going to push you, arrest you when you use it, just like caffeine. But as you start using these substances, the tendency to get addicted to them is always high. So I am very keen on individual responsibility when it comes to the usage of substances, irrespective of what it is. However, we have some age limits that we should be very critical of, and this has to do with children and people who do not have mental states to be able to make decisions for themselves. In those cases, their exposure to these substances become a problem. Because indeed, these substances we speak of can be used responsibly, both for medical purposes as well as for recreational. But depending on the jurisdiction in which you find yourself, this could be illegal.
I see.
Addiction, we try to move away from the legal aspects of it because we as behavioral health professionals want to look at what triggers you or what drives you into making a decision to want to use a substance. And this indeed goes to what I call the psychosocial approach of even upbringing and supporting our communities. Most of these people who engage in these behaviors sometimes do not believe they belong. So they need do something to show that they are part of the cohort, they are part of the mafia group, they are woke, and all of these things. And they need these substances to be able to deter them from their conscious states in order to partake in it. Point in case, when it comes to political rallies, it comes to aggressive behaviors, you find such people wanting to go to a substance so that they don't have the sanity or the presence of mind, let me use that, to engage in that activity.
Indeed.
This substance you have gone for, have you ever thought what the side effect is and where it could lead you to? Because gradually, as you chose to use it, a time it's coming where it will choose to use you, because then you don't have any control again. When you have the withdrawal, you have the urge for it, you sell everything, you lose everything just to get that substance.
Yeah.
It could be better for you. Indeed, people are researching into even the gambling.
I think that the interesting thing, which we've touched a bit on, is the fact that there are those, especially young people, who say, well, that could never be me. I would never get to the point where I'd have to steal to fund my addiction. I'd have to rob someone to fund my addiction. I'd have to sell what I own to fund my addiction. And, it comes back to the point where I said, you don't realize when you're going down slope. But I do want us to talk about two critical substances just before we go into how people can get help. And Oluwaseun, I hope that you can take us on from there. Alcohol and cannabis. When you talk about methamphetamine, you talk about fentanyl, people know and are aware that, okay, these ones are hard drugs, they could kill me instantly. But on the subject of alcohol and cannabis, people tread a very thin line. And as experts, I'm hoping that you can sieve it out for us. So let's talk about alcohol and cannabis. Oluwaseun.
Alcohol is socially acceptable. So if you go to parties, as a matter of fact, if you go to parties where alcohol are served and they ask you what you drink and you say you don't take alcohol, you see that look they give to you. It's socially acceptable so long you don't get intoxicated. And alcohol, as socially acceptable as it can be, is the only substance that can affect every aspect of your body, from your head down to your toes. But most people don't know. That's why you see someone who takes alcohol. Alcohol, there are different brands. Even gin, dry gin, how to see alcohol. So people taking all of this, they normally think, the normal thing they normally used to console themselves is that I can stop when I want to stop. So I just take just a bottle and I'm good. Alcohol is the only drug that can affect every aspect of your body. Then marijuana, there are 3 parts of your brain that get destroyed when you start taking marijuana. But people always feel, they tend to always quote some research done in isolation that it helps in quelling to deal with anxiety, depression, what have you. But they fail to know that those people that published those research work did not tell them the side effects of what it has caused when they tried it, because psychosis was on the eye. It was in the corollary.
Well, I think we lost Oluwaseun there.
There are 3 parts of your brain. The first one is your cerebral cortex, which is your executive function, where it deals with your memory, your thinking, your logical reasoning. Once that part is implicated, you see yourself, some people start losing touch with reality. They forget things. When you are not yet 80 years, you are already forgetting things. And people might just, they shrug it off, they think it's normal. The second part is the limbic system, due to your drive, your motivation. When you see some, once you start doing marijuana and start implicating your limbic system, you see yourself not having the drive. Despite your lofty goals, you don't have the drive to push, to get to your goals, to achieve your goals. And you see yourself, it also affects your libido.
There are some who will disagree with you and say that, well, when I take this substance, I do the opposite of the things you were saying. You were talking.
Let me. I'm heading somewhere. At first, it will do what they are saying. That it will make me eat. It will make me. But after a while, You know, in
After a
physics,
while.
there's a breaking point. When your brain cells are being stretched to a level, you see yourself going to that aspect I'm talking about, whereby
Right.
your drive stops, it goes down, your libidinal energy drops down. Then the third part is your midbrain. It deals with your sleep patterns and your consciousness. Once that part is implicated, you see yourself, some people will say they are hearing voices. Did you call my name? Meanwhile, nobody's calling their names. I'm seeing things. And you start seeing some of them, they don't sleep till maybe around 3 or 4. And it's
Well,
when I start treating people with substance use disorder, I observe that after they have been weaned off marijuana, after a while, they see themselves being able to remember their dreams. Because every one of us dreams. But we might not just be able to remember.
I see.
And for those who do marijuana, they just believe that they don't dream. But not until when they stop taking marijuana, after a while, you see them being able to remember things, to recollect their dreams.
Very well. We do have very little time, and I'm hoping that we could get people some help also, direct people rather, to get help. And so I'll move on to, I wanted us to discuss the economic value, you know, the debate around economic value of the marijuana plant and the social implications it could have on young people. Perhaps we'll leave that for another day. If I tell us, how do people get help? Somebody could be listening, somebody may be watching a little later and say, you know what, I may be spiraling. How do I get help? What do you say to such a person? You're muted.
There are accredited agencies, organizations, rehabilitation centers, and healthcare facilities and professionals around you. The first thing to do is don't be quiet about your situation. Say something. One of the 4 questions I asked today was when? When should we put people first? And the answer is now. On a Sunday, I saw a young man and I spoke to his parents one particular Sunday in one of those years earlier. And I said, I'm not comfortable with your son. It looks like he's a little bit challenged. Do you mind asking him to speak to a professional as soon as it's reasonably possible? And the father said, I have a busy week. I will think about it in the course of the week and we will do something. I saw him on a Sunday, and on Saturday that followed, they called me to say that the young man had died. So it means that immediately you discover something, immediately a family member has a challenge, speak to a professional as soon as it's reasonably possible. Don't be quiet. There are drug-free toll helplines, for example, in Nigeria, for the NDLEA, and there are professionals. Go to a teaching hospital, speak to a professional around you, and make sure that you are not quiet. The community, the village, the family, don't be silent. Help somebody near you. You are somebody, that is somebody's son, somebody's daughter. And if it is you, you can also walk into a facility, walk into a center and say, I need help. And you can get help.
Indeed.
And the use that you currently have today, you may be able to get out of it. So don't be quiet, get help. Professionals are available for you. Healthcare facilities are available for you. Drug-free toll lines and counselors are available for you. But the most important thing, don't keep silent.
Let me move on to Salim now. Salim, how do people get help in Ghana without the fear of especially arrest?
Let me start with the issue of self-help skills before I move to professional. First of all, know what you ingest. In the total control area of your life, what you eat, what you drink, where you go, it's your decision. So make sure everything you are ingesting into your body, you know what it does to you. And indeed, if it has some side effect, choose you over that substance. Secondly, most of substance users from clinics shows that you are either dealing with some psychosocial distress or trying to suppress some unresolved conflict from childhood or in your life. Remember, a suppressed emotion is only delayed, yet magnified. Find somewhere professional and vent about it and find very adaptive, rational ways to deal with it. So no matter how long you drink, how long you get high, that unresolved conflict or subconscious issues will still be there. Thirdly, don't self-stigmatize. Sometimes the stigma is not even there. It's your own interpretation that people are looking at you. Because like one of our speakers said, I don't know if it's Ife or Oloa, but he said that you get hallucinations and you get paranoia. Is what I want to add. The paranoia is basically you thinking everyone is out there to get you.
Right.
No one wants to get you in the health facility. So do walk into any facility, speak to a professional. And indeed, when it comes to the issues of arrest, until and unless the substance is found on you, then you cannot be arrested for
Absolutely.
it. But if you have a problem, do seek help, and you are important.
Indeed.
So yourself.
Gentlemen, we're being sung out of the studio, but I do appreciate your company here for such a great conversation and your insight on the subject matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Remember that addiction is not only with cannabis, fentanyl, methamphetamine, or tramadol. It could be that painkiller you're taking. It could be that cough syrup that you can't let go. If you think you need help, our conversation today is not substitute for medical or professional advice. Go to that health center and get some help. I am Kemeni Amana. I'll see you same time tomorrow here on The Square. Bye-bye.